get a contact. So
I was down
yeah,
there, lived in Austin for about 5 years, and so a lot of the folks that you're having on the podcast are people that I know or know. We have mutual friends or whatever. So it's pretty cool.
is that? I guess we can we can start from there then. So you um, in Austin for a number of years, and some of the folks that I had on the show, you kind of knew like who's some of those people.
Yeah.
I'm
So
curious now.
yeah. So we Adam. So actually, I came to know about you through Kat Hunter, who is not a
Yeah.
Texas. She's in Alabama, but
Yep.
I found out about you through her several months ago. Kat and I have written together for the she co-wrote some of the songs on the last album, my most recent album. But yeah, I lived in Austin almost 5 years and toured down there, and so Adam Hood is one that plays down there a good bit. But I've known Adam since, gosh, the late '90s. He and
He's
I grew up
he
in West
seems to
Georgia.
he seems to come up on every podcast for some
Yeah,
reason.
it's like 6 degrees of Adam Hood. You hear about the Kevin Bacon thing. It is definitely
Right.
that. But Adam knows everybody. He's been around forever. But he grew up in East Alabama, where I live now. I live in Opelika now, which is where he grew up.
Hmm.
Strangely, but I grew up in West Georgia, and so we were when I was kind of getting going in the '90s, and he was as well. We played a lot of the same venues, and we got to know each other and started gigging together and writing together and that kind of thing. And he was somewhat instrumental in introducing me to a lot of people in the Texas scene when I moved from Nashville to Austin in 2013. I was in Nashville for a little over 10 years prior to moving to Austin, and then when I moved to Austin, Adam connected me with a lot of great folks down there, the Galley Winter guys, and I toured did some openers with Bart Crow and Josh Grider and Jason Eady and Courtney Patton and a lot of those folks. And then since then, another good friend of mine who I had written with in Nashville a good bit that I know you have coming up on the podcast, David Adam Burns, and I have probably written 30 songs together when we were both living in Nashville, and he's killing it in Texas now too. So I'm proud to see that for him, and I'm sure y'all have fun when he's on.
That's cool. I wasn't familiar with him until he got on. So yeah, looking forward to that for sure. You mentioned Kat. Like she was one of the first people that I met actually on TikTok, and she seems to just be as same with as you mentioned as you and other folks have said about Adam Hood. Just they are who they portray that they
Absolutely.
are. And yeah, she was. I think she was episode 2 of this show. Just for,
Yeah, she's great. She plays a lot of the same rooms as my girlfriend is a musician, and I think the initial connection with Kat a while back was through Stacy. I'm pretty sure Stacy Jeffcoat, that owns a local in Alexander City, connected us because she knew that we all wrote songs and thought it would be a good connection, and it turned out to be. We ended up Kat's family has a cabin in Mentone in northeast Alabama, beautiful in the hills, beautiful place. And last year when I was working on writing and recording for the most recent album, we did a couple of songwriters weekends where we all went up to the cabin for the weekend and wrote songs all weekend, and we wrote some for my record and some for Kat's stuff as well, and had some good songs come out of it. It was a lot of fun. She's great.
yeah, she's got a couple songs that are about as tough as you can get. We
Yeah,
call Love Fights Back. That one's rough, man.
yeah.
There's some songs that you hope are not true stories. You know what I
Right,
mean? And
right.
you never know. And I didn't ask, but it's like, okay, I hope that one's not a true story.
Yeah,
Man, but that's that's the kind of stories you all kind of, I guess, strive for when writing songs.
for sure. And it's a weird. What's cool about doing those co-writing things after having been done. For years I did the. So when I first moved to Nashville after college, I moved there with the intention of chasing the artist deal and all that stuff, and didn't really go there specifically to be a songwriter, although I had always written songs. But I went there specifically trying to do the artist thing, and chased that and got real close. I worked with a great producer for a while that had a lot of success with some major artists, and it looked like everything was going to kind of take off at one point. We were doing showcases and label meetings and all that stuff, and then kind of at the last minute, we never found the right fit, and it was pretty frustrating from an artist standpoint. But what it made me do at the time was take a step back and just focus on writing for a while. And so I started doing a lot of the networking and co-writing in Nashville that people do. Sitting in a little room with a couple of perfect strangers. Sometimes when you first start doing it, you're writing with complete strangers, which can be a weird vibe to try to be throw out your best ideas and be vulnerable in a room with people that you don't really know. And so that was really an educational process for me to learn how I'd never written that way. I'd always either written by myself or with people that I was close to, people in my band or people like Adam that I'd known for many years. And so it was a different process trying to do the Nashville co-writing thing. And so I did that for, about the last 5 years or so in Nashville. I was really focusing more on the songwriting side and less on the artist side of things. And that was when Bro Country and that whole thing was kind of starting to really happen. And that's
Right.
not what I do. And so I'm looking around at what's getting cut and what Music Row is looking for in terms of songs. And I'm like, man, I'm not fit for this. I can't write this kind of stuff. I'm looking at pitch sheet. They send out pitch sheets of this artist is cutting and this kind of song they're looking for. And I'm looking at all these pitch sheets going, I don't know. And so I started writing. I had a buddy that was very tapped into the Texas music scene and was co-producing a band out of Houston with Radney Foster. And he called me. We had written a couple times together. He was a Warner Chappell writer named Jay Clementi. He's not with Warner Chappell now. He's on to other things. But at the time, he was writing at Warner, and he called me and said, "Hey, man, me and Radney are producing this band called Rosehill out of Houston, and I think you would be a good fit to write for their record. And so we're thinking we're going to fly down to Houston for a weekend and just see what happens, see if anything comes out of it." So we did that, and that was my first experience in the Texas music scene. We flew down and spent, I think it was like 4 days writing songs for them, and we did that a couple more times as they're prepping for that album. And then when they recorded it in Nashville with Radney and Jay producing, and it was a cool thing. I ended up with 4 songs on that record, and they introduced me to a bunch of people. And the more I started going to Texas, the more I realized that I was a better fit for what was happening in the Texas music scene than what was happening in the Nashville music scene at that time. This is
Right.
2011, 2012. And so in May of 2013, packed up the family and moved from Nashville to Austin. And stayed there for about 5 years, touring in Texas and writing with guys down there. And ended up coming back to the Southeast in 2017 because of some family stuff. So I grew up I'm originally from Georgia. So we moved to Georgia.
So you're not far.
Yeah. And then I'm in East Alabama now. So, yeah.
So what? So I'm assuming in Nashville you made your connections, and then in Austin you made your connections. Is there? I mean, I'm sure there is, but what are some of the vast differences between? I'm not trying to bash either one, but
Sure.
what are some of the major differences between the two?
Well,
Besides the style of music, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's that one, but
Mm-hmm.
from an approach standpoint, everybody in Nashville is a musician. Like the guy that delivers your pizza or drives your Uber or what. I mean, like there's so much great, and some not great, but there's a lot of great writers and artists in Nashville that are competing for a very small space there. So there's this weird, Nashville to me was this weird balance of trying to network and see who you're a good fit to work with and can build a relationship with that's both personal and professional. And then there's also that competition side that makes people kind of a little guarded with who they know or who they're willing to connect you with, or who, there's just, it's a weird balance of this guarded place where it's competitive and kind of cutthroat in some ways.
Because
my experience,
there's such a small piece of the pie, they have to
yes,
do that, right?
Exactly. And my experience when I went to Texas was it was a lot more collaborative and open. And when I started meeting guys in that scene and trying to establish myself there and get my name out there, they were all willing to let me open shows for them or introduce me to somebody else, or hey, you'd be a good fit with this dude. Let me call him on your behalf and connect y'all. There was a lot of that, and it just in the music scene in Texas. To me, my experience with it was a lot more collaborative and friendly and less competitive than what Nashville had been. And then stylistically, I was just a better fit. I've always struggled with really fitting into a box in terms of the kind of music that I do. It's there's elements of a lot of things in it, and so there's no bro country in it, but I'm not straight down the middle traditional country. I'm not even. I don't know. There's rock. There's a heavy R&B influence in what I do and how I sing. There's some bluesy to it, and also country. And I grew up on the Eagles and the Allman Brothers, but also Don Williams and Charlie Daniels and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different influences there that make it difficult when you're trying to do the Nashville thing to really fit into. That was the struggle with me as an artist. Was they're like, well, we don't really know what to do with you. When it came to Music Row, I didn't really fit anything that was going on there at the time. And I heard, it was funny. I heard a quote, and I wish I could remember who to attribute it to. But I heard somebody say during my time in Nashville that being different than other things is your biggest weakness until it becomes your greatest strength, right? Like once something happens for you, then it's great that you're different than everybody else. But until then, nobody wants to. Everybody's like, well, this is already working, so we want you to do more of this thing,
And the main example on today's radio is Stapleton.
Yeah, absolutely.
It took him forever to get the break, but
I remember going to see him play at the Station Inn in Nashville, and there being like 20 people there. And everybody in the room is just gobsmacked watching this dude. Like, this guy's so freaking talented. Why is he not a huge star? And it's just, you're absolutely right. And it's he blends a lot of the same kind of influences that I do. And there's guys like Foy Vance that have a lot of. I don't know if you're familiar with Foy.
Well, what a ridiculous talent that guy is.
Absolutely. And so that, Stapleton and Foy, those kind of guys are really kind of my vibe and what I love to listen to and what I kind of strive for musically in terms of the kind of stuff I write. It's got a lot of that soul R&B. It's also a little bit country. It's also a little bit singer-songwritery, so there's a lot of in there that makes it difficult to classify it into a genre. And everybody calls that stuff Americana now. And what is Americana? I mean, you look at an Americana chart right now, and you got Sierra Farrell next to Red Clay Strays, next to the Black Crowes, next to it's just crazy.
It's the leftovers, is what it is.
Right.
Which is fine.
Yeah. It's great music, is what it is.
Yeah. Did you run into any of those same kind of issues in the Austin scene as far as? I mean, I don't know. I know that Texas, a lot of Texas artists are similar, but there's also a lot of variety in Texas too.
Yeah.
So is that did you have any of the same obstacles there, or was it minimal?
One of the things that I loved about the Texas scene that's unique, besides okay, there's really 2 points I want to make here. So the Texas scene, fans are different in Texas, and I don't from a live music perspective, and I'm an old guy, man. I'm 50 years old, so I started playing out live music when I was in high school, and in the early '90s, a lot of people would go see and support bands and share those bands and tell their friends and bring more people next time, and it was possible to grow a live music following in Georgia or Alabama back then in ways that I don't. As I play in Georgia and Alabama now, it's different now. I don't really know how to explain that other than to say that in Texas, people are rabidly live music fans there. And so the first piece that affected me there was the interaction and feedback from the people that would come to the shows, and as that would grow and people would help, and they considered it a duty to spread the word about a band that they liked, right? So and that's not something that I see happen in Georgia, Alabama anymore, and that's sad. It's like everybody kind of right now is sitting around looking at each other going, well, I'm waiting on somebody to tell me what's cool so then I can say that's cool too, you know. And it's I'm not slagging on. I mean, I have a great time playing the places I play here. I'm not slagging that, but it's just a different vibe in Texas.
No, I understand. It's the same. It's the same here. It's the same here. You know, even just in the cover guy stuff that I do. You know, I might want to play something that I like. That, you know, I might want to play a Ward Davis song. You know. But they're probably gonna know the Cody Jinks song and not the Ward Davis song.
Right.
You know, and until they get to that level, and they're only gonna know 3 Cody Jinks songs. You know, or whatever the case is. So until they get to that Tyler Childers level or Zach Bryan level or whatever, in most of the I can only speak for my area, but it seems to be pretty common. Until you get on that other level. It's rough, you know.
Exactly.
And I've told this story before, but like you were talking about in Texas, you know, and we talked about Hood. You know, he would play a show in Texas, or in Jason Eady also, same situation. Play a show in Texas and have a full room. Come to Memphis across that Mississippi River, and there might be 40 people. You know? Which is great for the guy like me that's going to see it.
Right.
Because especially if they're cool like those two are, because they're basically taking requests. What do you want to hear? You know, you become best friends at that point. You know,
right.
But it's rough. I know it's rough, and I don't really know what the answer to that is. I don't think anybody does, but it is crazy how the different frame of minds and the live music culture is, because it's probably the same there. Most places are not supporting original music in the South, and I don't know about everywhere else, but our area is you know, 99% of it, 99% is the same old covers that everybody's been playing for forever now.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, when I do shows around here with my band, you know, regionally, I would say I probably do half and half covers and originals around. I mean, you know, there's been times when I was touring, I was doing nothing but originals, and I've had to, you know, to be able to kind of navigate that since leaving Texas. I've had to kind of do half and half covers, or 60% original, 40% cover, or whatever it is, you know. And so I try to choose covers that I really enjoy, that are from artists that I really enjoy, that are not the same old mainstream things that you hear everybody do. So if I'm going to do a cover song, it's going to be something that I love, and it's going to be kind of my take on it, which kind of lets me be creative with it and do the original thing, you know, be almost like an original song in some ways. But, you know, the other point about Texas that I was going to make is radio, the fact that Texas radio will support independent artists there. That was another game changer for me that I had not experienced anywhere else in the country prior to moving there. And so when I was getting radio play in Texas, it makes it easier to book shows. It makes it easier to get butts and chairs, you know, and to make connections with other artists, because they, you know, radio in the same way that fans there support new artists and emerging artists there, radio does the same thing. And so that is unique to Texas for sure.
Well, I want to make sure we talk about this before I forget about it, because we've talked about Nashville, we've talked about Austin. These days, if you look on those Outlaw Country Americana charts, there's a lot of Alabama going on right now.
Yes.
And I guess there's something new I want to say new in the water, but it's always been there. It's just getting some push right now, and you know.
Yeah, there's you know, Muscadine Bloodline and Taylor Honeycutt and Red Clay Strays, and I mean, yeah, there's always been a lot of talent here, and for whatever reason, it's like you said, when you hit that next level, it really starts to take on a new life. And there's been several artists out of Alabama in the past couple of years that have really started to emerge on a national on the national stage, and it's awesome to see that happen. And so I hope that trend continues in Alabama. I would love. I'm hoping that it's going to trickle down to guys like me who aren't at that level, that can see some benefit from people looking to Alabama for great music these days.
I guess the hope would be, they could that some of those venues will see that there's a possibility to make money off of people like that also.
Right. Absolutely.
Because it's there.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of great music here, and there's a lot of rich history here. I got to on a project a few years ago. I had the opportunity to go record in Muscle Shoals. I don't know if you've ever been to Muscle Shoals and Fame Studio and Muscle Shoals Sound and seen all that, but there's so much history there, going back to the Motown era in the '60s and Rick Hall and everything that happened there. That was a crazy cool experience for me because I'm so heavily influenced by that kind of music. There's been great rock records and country records and R&B records that have come out of Muscle Shoals, and so that was a super cool experience. And so the more Alabama music history can start, kind of seeping into larger musical culture nowadays, I'm excited about that.
What about the do you think you mentioned all the styles that you were kind of that you want to join in your music?
Mm-hmm.
Is that attributed to your your area? Because you mentioned Georgia. I know there's a ton of old R&B that come out of that area. Is that something that you were just around?
Yeah, I'm sure that is a factor in it. My parents, neither of my parents are musicians. My mom is reconnecting. You still hear me? Lost you for a second.
Mine says I'm still going, so hopefully
okay, cool.
Everything's still good. Yeah.
So my mom played piano a little bit, but she would never have considered herself really a musician. And my dad doesn't play anything, but I started off on piano as a little kid, and then started playing guitar when I was in high school and playing in bands then. But my parents were pretty eclectic in what they listened to, so I had equal doses of Alabama and Don Williams and Charlie Daniels.
Yeah, it keeps breaking up on this end. Hopefully it's coming in clear on yours.
Yeah, I'm seeing you. You got me?
It just keeps getting scrabbly. Yeah.
It'll
be fine on the actual recording on the podcast.
Okay.
I just can't tell what you're saying. No. Yeah. But I did hear you say that as far as you're talking about your family and your music.
Yeah, they were very eclectic in what they listened to, which rubbed off on me. I mean, I was raised on traditional country stuff like Don Williams, as well as the Allman Brothers and the Eagles, and my mom actually both my parents liked some pop music at the time too when I was growing up. So there's a lot of influences that when I started writing my own songs that kind of factored into that. So I definitely think that is the case.
I got you. One of the other things I wanted to ask about, you said that when you were in Nashville that everybody's kind of, whether they were guarded at the beginning or not, by the time they got into the business of Nashville, they kind of had to be guarded to a point. What about as far as Texas and that goes? That seems to be, what am I trying to say? But it seems to be like if they can tell you're road dogging it and you're pulling your weight, they're willing to help.
Absolutely, I'd say that's absolutely true.
If you're
yeah, that's absolutely true.
So
yes.
that's something that you picked up on pretty quick.
For sure, everybody. I didn't. My experience was everybody that I encountered in the scene there that was doing the thing. That was out gigging and trying to make stuff happen on a larger scale. All of those people were friendly and supportive. I can't think of a single example of anybody that I met that I thought was an asshole or that was,
That's
I mean,
right.
everybody that I encountered in the scene there was super cool to work with and interact with and hang out with backstage and all that. So
So that's but that I mean, as soon as you kind of prove, I guess, showed your that's what you were trying to do, it was pretty easy to get involved, I guess, or you know what I mean? Because I mean, you made well. I guess you already had connections though, right? When because
yeah,
you were
yeah.
writing
So
with people in Texas. Okay,
yeah,
so you didn't go in there completely without anything. Yeah,
right. Yeah, it did
gotcha.
help that I had been working with folks that were already established in the scene and I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, it's pe- people are tend to be more accepting if they know that you're already connected with somebody that they're familiar with. But beyond that, I could say once I got there and started really working hard and showing that I was serious and playing tons of shows and touring in Texas and getting some attention from radio and that kind of stuff, the people that at that point realized that I was, very serious about what I did, and um, they were supportive of that and super cool to me during that whole time. I miss it.
Is
I
that
miss
something
Texas.
you okay? That's kind of what I was gonna say. Is that something you still uh, do you still go back there very often
I
as far as to
I,
play or
I
anything
do.
like that, or are you not able
I,
to right now, or what?
I do still go back. I've got a lot of friends there that I go and visit. I have not toured in Texas in a few years, just because I haven't been able to. From a family, I've had family stuff here. Went through a divorce a couple years ago, and so that was. I do not recommend. Do not recommend a divorce. It's tough to go through. But my kids are here,
Understood.
and yeah, and I work a day job as well. That's one thing that I have kind of off and on balanced through my music career. I've had periods where I was stretches where I was touring full time for even years at a time. Um, but I also have worked a good bit in radio and in advertising, digital advertising as well, kind of off and on for more than 20 years. So um, I do both now. I'm in marketing as well as doing music. All every I do music every weekend. I do marketing during the week now. So yeah,
Which I'm sure has its pluses and minuses.
right, right,
You know how you're not solely relying on the music to pay for things, but I'm sure
exactly.
you wish it was in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's I went. I,
Um,
I had many years of being broke and being on the road, traveling in a van and staying at Motel Six and not making any money. And that was, as a young man, you can do things like that before you have a family to support and that kind of thing. But it's very difficult to road dog at that level. At the kind of that's a young man's game as far as being able to get tour 200 shows a year and in a van and do it at not on a major scale where you're making really good money. I mean, it's just tough to do that, for a guy my age. So,
right.
but I'm still
Um,
making records, still writing
well,
songs. I put out a new
we're
album in
living
March.
healthier too.
What's that?
I said, and living healthier this way, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're
Um.
having this connection
So,
issue, man. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with my internet.
yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean, I can hear most of the time it's good. Then it'll buffer. Yeah. I don't know if switching to another. Um. I mean, it should be. I don't know. The product in the end, it'll be fine. But right now, we're focusing on TikTok. It's getting choppy. So, but um, so you said, yeah, you just released a. You want to try to connect to another Wi-Fi or something?
Yeah,
Or
hang
do
on
you
just a
have
second.
it?
Let me see if I can do that. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that.
Okay.
Bear with me.
Yeah, I can take all this out later. Um, all right. So for the folks that are on TikTok, Dan is um, on TikTok and stuff as well, and all other social media stuff. So make sure you go and follow him everywhere. Not in a stalking kind of way, just on social media.
Is that better? Is that reconnected now?
You got to be specific. I think so. It's hard to tell.
Okay.
Sometimes the picture is blurry, and that's okay. It's when the when the words get all out of whack. It's when it's
Yeah.
harder. But
So,
all right.
yeah.
So yeah,
The new album.
tell
Yeah.
about your music. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in let's see, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I went through a divorce in 2022, which sucked. Anybody who's been through divorce knows it is not pleasant, and so there was a lot of material that came out of that time when I was just kind of trying to process what was going on in my life and what my life was. I was married for 25 years, so I was, there's a lot of thought that goes into what is life going to look like now. You know what I mean? So that a lot of that seeped into the songs I was writing at the time, and even the title track for the album is one that Kat was a co-writer on, along with my girlfriend Suzanne and Hunter Reynolds. Suzanne and I met about a year after the divorce, and she's a musician too, so that has been cool to be in a musical relationship, as well. We gig together some. That's been cool, but in the hindsight of the divorce process and everything that happened, one of the things that people said to me, you hear the phrase about what doesn't kill you makes you stronger or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not true, but one of the things that I came to realize is that going through something like that changes your perspective on a lot of things, and how you look at the world and how you look at yourself, and your day-to-day life and what you're looking for in a companion, in a mate, and the 25-year marriage. There's a lot of good that during those 25 years, and then there were obviously it didn't work out, so there's also some bad, and
Right.
you just get very reflective about all those things after the fact. And so the album, the song that we wrote that I tried to kind of encapsulate that ended up being the title cut for the album. It's called Life and Death, DEPTH, not death, DEATH. And that's, to me, it's because life, living through that kind of stuff, whether it made me stronger or not, I don't know, but it did give me different depth and perspective about the way I look at things. And so that's kind of what we tried to capture in that song, and that ended up being the title cut for the album. But yeah, it was an experience, writing and recording an album in the wake of all that. It was different than anything I had ever done on albums. This is my 10th album, I believe. 10th, I think it's right. And so that was a different process for me than any album I'd have ever done prior to this one.
Just because it was so much more personal than before.
Yeah,
Strictly because of the songs you were writing at the time.
absolutely. And what us as songwriters, we process through music. It's in a lot of ways, and that's both good and bad. There's songs on the album that are what I would say are positive or uplifting songs. There's also some very dark songs on the album, and that's all that roller coaster of emotions that you go through in the relationship ending. And then, like I said, the following, almost a year later, I met Suzanne and started thinking that maybe I could actually be in a relationship again, and all those feelings, and there's a lot of things that happened during that maybe 18-month period in my life that ended up filtering into that album. And so there's a lot of ground covered in terms of subject matter on the album because of that.
So I'm gonna get you to play a song, but I want to ask before that slips away that I know you 10 albums in, and you've been writing songs for a long time. But and I'm not to say that this album is the first one that you wrote where it's had personal subjects or whatever. But clearly, I guess performing these songs or listening to these songs back, how is that different from it being so personal?
Yeah.
Compared to just writing an idea, a random idea.
Yeah, I definitely think it's different. It definitely affects me more when I perform them or when I listen to them back. It's like you say, all those years in Nashville when I was co-writing with other people and chasing the songwriter thing. I'd keep a file of ideas in my phone, and what I thought was I'd come up with a good title or whatever, and then I would throw that out to co-writers, and we would kind of build a story around that based on one of our life experiences, or maybe a melding of all of our life experiences. But this album specifically is songs that are largely things that I lived through during that 18-month period, and that's the first time that I put a whole album together of things that were really that way. And so it is definitely a different effect. There's a couple of them that I don't do at live shows, just because it's too it's too emotionally charged for me to feel like I can do that in front of a room full of people.
Is that the first time you've had that situation, even with all those albums in the past? Or
yeah, I think it's the first time that I've ever had songs on an album that I felt like I knew when I recorded them that there was no way I would ever play them live. It's the first time that's ever happened. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I got you. I understand. That's like you said, that's the good and the bad of being a songwriter and putting you in a song. So
yeah.
Well, do you want to play one of those?
Yeah.
Well, it's completely your choice of what you like. The Turnpike Troubadours shirt too.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. I got to go see them and Red Clay Strays and Brent Cobb recently in Macon, Georgia, and that was an awesome show.
I bet it was.
That was an awesome show.
I was kind of in somewhat your neighborhood to see them. I went to Huntsville to see Turnpike, and Blackberry Smoke together last year.
That's awesome. I bet that was a great show too.
Mm-hmm. Great venue too. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's kind of a Coliseum setup.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
There's an amphitheater, but it wasn't too big. It was cool.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, so this song, this is one that we wrote on one of those weekends in Mentone, those songwriter weekends in Mentone. So it's me and Suzanne Schultz and Kat Hunter and her drummer Hunter Reynolds that weekend, and we were talking about that life and death idea, kind of like I explained it to you a minute ago about how it changed my perspective, and we ended up building this song around that. So this is the title cut from the album. It's called Life and Death. Out of the cold, clear blue, lost everything I knew. The world grew up and I didn't have a say. Forcing me to change my view on who am I, who are you. Was everything I lied to yesterday. What the hell am I supposed to do? Out here with no net, no parachute. I didn't know that I should hold my breath. Going that far under could have been my death. It didn't make me any stronger, trying to hold on any longer. I let go and reach for the life that's left. It ain't over, but it ain't killed me yet. It's a matter of life and death. One day at a time, less and less I'm living life. The broken man that you left behind. I know what I have to do. I don't need no net, no parachute. But I didn't know that I should hold my breath. Going that far under could have been my death. It didn't make me any stronger, trying to hold on any longer. I let go and reach for the light that's left. It's all over and it ain't killed me yet. It's only life and death. I no longer have to hold my breath. Going that far under could have been my death. It don't make me any stronger, trying to hold on any longer. I let go and reach for the light that's left. It's all over and it ain't killed me yet. It's only life and death.
Yeah, man. That's a good one.
Thanks, man.
So clearly that's one of them that you're able to, from the album, that you're cool with playing.
Yeah.
And that one, you said that one was written with Kat and their drummer. What's his name?
Hunter Reynolds and Suzanne
Hunter,
Schultz.
right.
Yeah, the four of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a great weekend, a couple of great weekends, but the weekend that we wrote that song, I think we got 3 more that weekend, and out of the 4, I think 3 of them made my album from that weekend. So it was a really productive time.
Cool.
I love that kind of thing where you kind of just unplug from the world and you're just completely immersed in just the songwriting process for a couple days, and you ignore everything else. You don't turn on the TV or the news, or you know what I mean. It's just you're completely immersed in that. It's a lot of fun and a great way to work.
Is that something you get to do very often?
It is not something I wish I could do it a lot more often. I would say maybe 2-3 times a year is about the extent of when I get to do that. And I try to do it, when I'm writing for now. I mean, I'm always writing. That's one of the funny things about all of us that do this is, whether I'm playing a show for 2,000 people or 20 people, it's something I'm always going to be doing for the rest of my life, right? It's part of who I am, and so I'm always writing songs, whether it's by myself or with other people. But when I'm really working on an album and trying to kind of gear towards knowing I'm going to be recording soon, I'll amp that up and try to push myself to do more and really do those focused weekends where we can get 3 or 4 at a time to choose from. And normally, if you go in for a few days and write 4 songs, maybe one of those makes a record, out of the 4. So it was really special that we got a few out of that process. That was really cool.
You think that was just because of the kind of same wavelength with the group that went? Do you think that's part of why you got so many out of that?
Yeah, I think it was a fit that we were all, we were a fit in our vibe and how we look at and how we write, how we talk about ideas, and also the environment makes a big difference in being, when you're in a beautiful place like that, at that cabin in the middle of the woods, and that's inspirational too. So it's it makes it easier to try to get creative than when you're sitting in your own living room that you're in every day,
Right.
Yeah.
I could imagine that. Yeah. And she got to open up for the 6 Degrees of Adam Hood. Right, not long ago, and yeah, that was cool. I was happy for her on that.
Yeah, super cool.
So who we're talking about is Cat Hunter. She was on episode, I believe it was 2. It's either 2 or 3 of this podcast. She was one of the guinea pigs at the at the very beginning. What was super cool to do it. So yeah, and that was probably a year and a half ago, and then not long ago she did get to open for Hood in Birmingham. So, how is I guess you just released this album in March, but you said you're working on another.
Yeah.
How do you have kind of a structure that you like to do on that, or is it just kind of something you when you feel the time is right, or how does that work for you?
I do. So I would say for the first maybe 15 or so years that I was doing music, when I would record, I would do that in a studio. I would book studio time, and I would go in for a week or 10 days or whatever, and we'd start on day 1, and by day 10 we'd have an album, right? And so that's how I worked for years and years. But during that time, I became so fascinated with the recording process, and I soaked up as much as I could, and I asked tons of questions, and I read a lot, and I did tutorials, and I talked to engineer friends of mine about, hey, how does this work, or what does this piece of gear do? And so for all that time, I was kind of building a knowledge base in all the recording I was doing. At the time when I was in Nashville, I was doing a little bit of session work too on other people's projects, and that was fun. And that was a whole different thing when you're doing that than kind of thinking about what you want for your own record. When you're going in and you're trying to listen to what the other artist is wanting for their thing and try to make, just to put you in a different mindset. So there's a lot of things that I learned during those years in Nashville. I've been spending a lot of time in studios. And so I started kind of tinkering with recording at home. And the last few records that I have done that way. And so it's, rather than having 10 days to go from start to finish on a record, I might work on something for 6 months or 8 months, a couple days here and a couple days there, spread out as
right.
things happen. And so that's changed my process. But studio time, recording time to me is therapy. I mean, like, I zone out, I forget everything else that's happening on earth when I'm doing that. It's my happy place as far as how to spend. I mean, I love playing live and I love writing songs, but recording is my favorite part of the creative process. I really, really enjoy the recording process. And so I do a lot of that at home. And so coming out of the album, I think I finished recording and mixing the Life and Death album right at the end of last year. Maybe January of this year, it might have been. No, it was I finished it back in the end of 23. And so for about 5 or 6 months, I didn't do anything in terms of recording. I was still writing a little bit, but I hadn't really started recording anything. And then in the past couple of weeks, I've started picking out songs that got written during those months and started tinkering around with the early ideas around, the work tapes and the early ideas around recording. So I'm not anywhere near having a finished album, but I have started that process for the next one. And the next one is going to be, I think, from what I've written and what I've started recording, I think it's going to lean heavily into that R&B side of what I do. It's going to be more like the Foy Vance kind of vibe and Muscle Shoals kind of sound. A lot of that influence is really going to. I'm really into Marcus King right now too, and that kind of vibe as well. So I think that's probably going to end up being evident on this album, because that's the kind of stuff I'm writing right now, is the more R&B influenced stuff. So we'll see.
So when you write those at home, or you start putting it together at home and everything, do you get it to a certain point and then you're like, okay, now I need to get into a studio, or is it pretty much, as far as I know, you're going to bring in other players and things of that nature to fit whatever it is you're shooting for on the song? But yes. How do you get from okay, I've done all I can do at home, or where does it go from there, or do you finish it at home?
Yeah, so it's different. It varies sometimes in my process. I had, like, on the last record, I had some guest musicians. I had a pedal steel player come in and add pedal steel on some songs, and I had a fiddle player that I used to play with in Nashville that played on a couple of songs. And so, like, auxiliary instruments, I'll bring somebody in. sometimes the bass player that plays on all my stuff, Steve, has been playing bass with me since '97 or '98, and so he's always part of the process. But beyond Steve, it really varies from song to song or album to album. And this last one, I did most everything aside from 3 or 4 guest musicians. I did the rest of it myself, and I mixed it here and I mastered it here. And so it's been fun to learn how to do those things over the years, and I know enough to be dangerous now, which in some ways is good. I mean, not knowing everything sometimes is a good thing in terms of, you end up with something comes out cool because I don't know any better. You know what I mean?
Something different.
And so that has been my process. And so I typically nowadays, I'm not opposed to going back into a studio, but that's not really how I work these days. So that may change at some point. But for now, I would say 90% of anything that I record is going to be me playing it at my house, or me calling a buddy that I've got a part in my head that I don't have the ability to play on, and pedal steel, for example. And I'll call my buddy Sean and say, "Hey man, I need a pedal steel part for this song. Can you bring it over?" And he'll come over and we'll do that. So,
and I'm sure these days it's just more financially responsible to
do
as
very
much in-house as possible.
It is very expensive to go into a studio and record and hire players, and I've done that route too. And it is that's hard to do as an independent artist, for sure. When you're paying all of the bills yourself, it's hard to do that. Yeah.
Well, that's it's like I guess I've heard several people say that if people that cover songs and they don't do them exactly the way that it is done by the original person, but not because they're trying to, but because that's all they can do. Sometimes stumble on something really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, when I'm learning a cover song, picking a cover song to add to a band show, a lot of times it'll be a song that I've heard or that I'm familiar with from the past. Even if it's a year ago or 5 years ago or whatever, that I've heard it and familiar with it, but I won't go back and listen to that album or the original song. I will try to pick it out on my guitar, figure out, and kind of, a lot of times what comes from that is I'm not playing it exactly the way the original was, or in the same key, or I'm changing a guitar part or a vocal melody here and there because I can't exactly remember how it was on the original, and that ends up, I'll make a work tape of that, and that ends up being how I do it live sometimes, and sometimes that's cool because it's still, even though it's a cover song, it gives me the opportunity to be creative in how I approach it.
I feel like even in my scenario and the stuff I do, like at a bar gig or whatever, if I got somewhat of the structure of the song, I know I'm not that good of a guitar player or singer or anything, but if I can kind of get that structure of it, then I can without thinking about it make it my own.
Yeah.
It's more me because that's all
Absolutely.
I got, especially when I'm doing acoustic gigs by myself. Somebody, Cynthia in the chat asked, how hard is it to release indie or release songs as an indie artist? Jesus, how hard is it to release songs as an indie artist? That's what I'm trying to say.
It is the process of releasing songs is not difficult. There's a couple of online distributors that you can go through that once I have a finished album that's mixed and mastered and ready to be put out in the world, I can go through my online distributor. You just basically sign up for an account, you upload it, and there's some bells and whistles that you check and uncheck and what you want to do. The problem as an independent artist is not in the distribution or the release of the album, but really figuring out how to get it in front of a lot of ears. That's what is hard as an independent artist, is to grow an audience for new music once it's out there, because the barrier to entry is so low for anybody to be able to put music out. There's
a lot,
so much music flooded on the internet, and there's so many options for people to listen to. It makes it very difficult for people to find. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, and it's sometimes, and so that's why it's so important that people, when you run across something that you love musically, tell 10 people or share it on your social media or whatever that is, because that helps grow an audience for something that has that has legs, that if you hear something you love it, chances are other people, or there's gonna be people that love it too, that and so that grassroots effort as an independent artist is really what's tough to grow once it's out in the world, because there's just a flood of every week. There's a flood of so much music from so many sources for people to choose from,
which is great in some cases, and because then because if that avenue wasn't there, then you wouldn't be able to release yours.
That's exactly right.
But it is extremely difficult for people to find what they might like. I mean, I'm bad about. I listen to a ton of different music, but I kind of go through phases where I'm not looking for as much music as I do at other times. If after I listen to my fill of Turnpike Troubadours and Chris Knight songs in one day, there's not a lot of hours left for me to find new artists.
Right.
So I'm terrible about that. I mean, I used to be where I would really search that out, and now I don't search as much. Also, my job doesn't allow me to have as much earphone time as these days. So that does change, but I can see where or why we all kind of get in our box. So to find new music or to let it creep in is it's an interesting topic, I guess. Really.
Yeah, for sure. It's the music business has changed so much. I mean, again, I will say again, I'm an old guy. I've been doing this for a long, long time. I started when I was in high school, so whatever the math on that is, more than 30 years I've been doing some sort of music. And I worked for years in radio, and I worked for a brief time for a record label in Nashville, and so I've seen the business from a lot of different angles. Touring as an artist and as a songwriter, and trying to make publishing happen, as trying to get cuts on other artists and that kind of thing. There's just so many different aspects of the business, and all that has changed so drastically over the last 30 years or even the last 10 years. And it's just it's hard to keep up with, and it's hard. There's so much of it's content driven now and social media driven, and there's this whole battle, and there's this whole battle of creating compelling content that people want to see, and you got to do it every day, and you got to do it all the time, and it starts to overshadow the creative process and the live music process and all the other things that have to happen in your life, because you got to make 2 TikTok videos today, or you got to make posts on Facebook and X and wherever. It's just it becomes overwhelming as an independent artist that does not have a staff of people to do those things. So it's very tough to grow a fan base now, even though there's access. There's readily available access to a way to get music out there, but it's very difficult to grow it in any meaningful way in terms of real fans that are going to buy concert tickets or buy T-shirts, shows, or whatever it is. It's an interesting challenge for the music business, and how to figure out how to go forward as an independent musician. We're all trying to figure it out as we go.
Yeah, I mean, even on a smaller level on my part, record 2 podcasts a week, and then edit them, and then get them out there, and not just to post them, but actually get some promotional videos or something for somebody to see or whatever. And to be honest, if a little behind the scenes thing for the folks that are on here and anybody else that watches this podcast, if I post a Willie Nelson video, it's not that I don't like Willie Nelson. It's because I'm trying to get other people to follow me so that they will eventually follow Dan.
Right.
Hopefully that will all interconnect.
Right.
That's why is it doing that? Yeah. So apparently I need to make a comment on TikTok. It says I've been inactive. But yeah, I mean, like I said, not that I don't like. I'm a huge vinyl guy. I love live music. I love just about everything I post of somebody else's. Is something that I find interesting. I'm not fudging it necessarily, but also this is the whole point of this. Just the goal is for people to find the other stuff. Hopefully,
yeah.
And also I like it to where so we had Kat on, and then Kat led to you, and if I post a a Chris Knight song or whatever this Adam Hood song, then people in the comments, hopefully, those people have met each other.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah.
I like that part of it. But it
Absolutely.
it takes a lot of time, even on the little bit that I do. So I can only imagine, and not just time, but you also try to figure out what to post, what to share, what to do this to try to promote. Because I can get all these people on the podcast, but if nobody ever sees it, then why do they ever want to come on again? Besides our, I mean, it's a cool conversation, but still, you've got other stuff in your life you want to do.
Right.
So, it definitely is different. So, so who are, I'm sure, and I'm sure, especially in your Texas time and different periods, you've done opening slots for folks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who are some of the folks that you've opened for? And I like to ask this question as far as when you clearly, or even in your own gigs, if you're playing out somewhere and they don't know who you are, when in the light bulb, you can see that you just made a fan.
Mm-hmm.
How does that, how does that kind of walk, I guess explain that, and how do you feel when that happens?
Yeah, it's awesome. So I've had a couple different experiences when it comes to opening gigs. I've done some festival shows where I got to open for some really cool national. I mean, and even sometimes bands that weren't a great fit musically. You know how sometimes on a festival bill you'll end up with
right
things kind of on separate genres. Something like I opened for Train once. I opened for the band Live once. That was really cool. But those interactions and those opening slots on a festival gig are probably not going to end up being a meaningful relationship with that artist. And I mean, it's just, I didn't get to meet, I got to meet them, but it was like, hey, how you doing? And they kept walking and doing their thing. And so it was not something that we could draft on, as an independent new artist, that I could draft on that relationship and get more gigs with them or whatever. But when I moved to Texas in particular, I started opening for guys who were already established in that scene, and that led me to open for other guys that were established in that scene. So I mean, I got to play. Initially, I got to play with, I mentioned earlier, guys like Bart Crow and Josh Grider, and then eventually Walt Wilkins. I played some stuff with Walt, and I got to know the guys in the Josh Abbott band, and they pulled me up to do some songs with them at one of their shows, and that opened some doors for me down there with some radio people and whatever. And it's just those kind of things tend to snowball if you can develop friendships with bands that you're similar to and that you respect. If they hear what you do and they like it, a lot of times that can open doors. I mean, William Clark Green is an awesome artist that I've had an opportunity to hang with some, and Sam Riggs at the time was really big. I opened for him at Floors in Helotes once.
Okay.
There's a lot.
That's another. Yeah, that's another question I want to ask. But but when you're doing a cover gig or even a solo gig or by yourself, and you know that these people have never heard my music before, but then they dig when the light bulb comes on that they're digging what you do, or meet you to buy a koozie or whatever the case is. How is that for you?
That's what it's about, man. I mean, those relations. It's super fulfilling, but it also tends to when you make a real connection like that with somebody who. I mean, you mentioned buying merch. That's a great example. Somebody who's willing to throw down money to buy your merch when they never heard your name before they came to that show. Chances are that's somebody that you're going to see at future shows that are going to tell friends and bring friends, and so you're going to start seeing those faces again at shows, and that's what it's about. I mean, all of the years that I toured and kind of especially traveling large areas to tour. When I was for about 5 years, I was touring kind of the southeast corner of the country. This is prior to my Texas years, and so pretty much like Southern Illinois over to Virginia, down to Florida, and over to Louisiana. So inside that square. And during those years, developing those relationships where people would come and see us once and didn't know us, and then they would come back next time, and then by the third or fourth time, they're personal friends of mine, and I've got them on my cell phone, and if I need a floor to crash on when we come through town, we can do that. And so that's super cool, and that's what it is all about for sure. Those relationships.
As somebody that really likes their recliner in their bed at night and everything, how are those relationships, like you mentioned, the floors to crash on and everything? That's part of the process that I'm intrigued by, but I don't want to go through it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I tell people all
or
the
maybe
time.
maybe I do once for like a week, and that's
Yeah,
it. You know.
when we were doing that full time, and sleeping on tons of floors or in tons of Motel Six. We'd have four of us in one room in a Motel Six, stacked up, sharing beds, whatever, because that's what we could afford to do. Or we would sleep on friends' floors, fans' floors, whatever. Um, I was in my 20s then when I first started doing that, and that was a different times before the kids came along and that kind of thing. And I tell people all the time that I would not trade that experience for anything in the world, and I would never go back and do it again either. Because we were, I mean, it's very, very hard to, drive 6 hours, play a 3 hour show, sleep on a floor for 3 hours, and then drive 6 hours to do it again. And we were doing that at one time. I was playing between 175 and 200 shows a year. So in a van, traveling in a van, eating a Waffle House, and it was a lot of fun as a young musician to do that. It was a great experience. I met tons of people, and it was a blast, and it was awesome. And I never would do that again that way because it was hard.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just broke enough to get to or just enough money to get to the next one.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, it sounds, and like I said, I want to do that one time, but not really. Maybe 2 days.
But I'm too old to tour that way these days. I can't do that.
Shit.
These days. I'm gonna have to be cushier than that, bougier than that if I'm gonna be on the road now. Yeah, at full time.
I know. I understand. So one of the other questions I want to ask, and we'll try to wrap it up in a little bit, but
okay.
You're traveling musician, producer, songwriter, or I know it's for yourself, but it's songwriter, all of these things. Which is, I'll go into my buddy Talbot's question here. If you got a pie, out of that pie, what is 50% songwriter, musician, producer? What is that natural to you? What is the I guess the process that is natural for you?
Yeah. Well,
the math doesn't have to be exact. It's okay.
Yeah, I have played I have played live a good bit for most of my adult life. So even when I'm like now when I'm playing regional gigs in this area and working a full-time job during the week, I'm still playing 8 or 10 shows a month, regionally. So it's I would say a good, when you look at it on a percentage basis, as far as how I spend my time doing musical things, it is a good bit of it is playing live. Because I love recording and the recording process so much, I wish that I had time to do that more. My choice would be, if I could do anything I want to do, my choice would be to be 50% of the time recording and producing, 25% of the time playing live, and 25% of the time writing songs. That would be what I would choose if I could do that.
Right.
My life has not been in a place where I can do those percentages up to now, but maybe at some point it'll be. And I have had the opportunity to record other artists and produce some stuff as well, or co-produce, or engineer stuff for friends or whatever. And every time I do that kind of thing, I learn something from that process. I learn about a piece of gear, or I learn about a way to mic something differently, or a different approach to how to record something. And all those experiences are cumulative, and they all come back into, when I make my next record, that's things I've learned, more tools in my toolbox that I can use when I'm recording next time. So it's, I would love to do more recording than I currently do, because that's really where my most passion is. But beyond that, I would say probably right now, in reality, I spend more time playing live than I do anything else.
And working.
And working, yeah. Absolutely.
What's the I'm sure there is a huge difference, but between working on somebody else's album and working on your own album, is I guess working on someone else's album, you're trying to find what they're looking for, I guess,
Exactly.
and then on yours, you're trying to find what you want, I guess, is
Yeah. So I have worked on other people's records from both the standpoint of songwriting and writing for their album. You know, if they have, let's say, well, in the case of the band from Houston that I mentioned earlier, Rose Hill, at the time they were wanting to go in and record 10 or 12 songs, and they at the time had 3 or 4 that they knew they wanted to put on the record, and they were looking for other songs of a certain vibe, tempo, whatever it is, that spoke in some way for the album as a whole that they didn't have yet. So in that case, we're approaching that as songwriters, going, okay, well, what does the album need that it doesn't have, and then let's try to write some stuff towards that direction. And so that's it sometimes, in trying to help them realize a vision creatively, or help them find their vision creatively in what in what I can do to help them kind of down the road that they want to go down. So that's one piece, the songwriter side. From the producer side, it can run the gamut. It can be, a lot of times it's getting to know what the artist wants the album to be, and what they want the album to do for them. So is this album going to be a representation of how they sound live and get them more live gigs, or is this going to be something that's like their ultimate soundscape vision of how awesome they have in their head for this song, and it's not anything that could ever pull off live because it's way too big and too many instruments for that or whatever. But a lot of times it's about getting to know what the artist's vision for what they want to do is, and then try to help them make that happen. And that's a fun challenge too, and it's different than making my own records. So it's I would love to do more of that kind of work. The little bit that I've gotten to dip my toe in that, I've tremendously enjoyed it. So I would love to do more of that.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, all right. Well, we'll wrap all this up. So everybody that's on the chat right now, and anybody that happens to go find this video, the podcast, make sure you follow Dan everywhere that you can follow, all of his socials, and TikTok, and wherever you stream your music. Make sure you hit the follow button, so that you'll know when new music comes out. And
you can find links for all that on danadamsband.com. Links for all my socials and where to stream me and all those things.
You do have that. I noticed that you do have that. You have that set up pretty well and pretty simple. So there's not a lot of fluff to it, but it's a nice organized way. If you want to see where his tour dates are, is everything literally is right in a block. So you can, find everything that you need to find quickly. But yeah, make sure you interact with artists' posts. Hit the heart button, leave a comment, because it'll help them grow. Make sure you follow and share the music. If you enjoy it, like you said, that's probably extremely true. If you enjoy a song, there's a really good chance that you're going to know some people that do, especially if you're a live music person. That community gets pretty small sometimes. And so
those even if people, it makes a world of difference. Even though it just takes a couple minutes of somebody's time, and if you share a song with a friend or a bunch of friends, it makes a world of difference to the artist. So yeah.
All right, Dan, man, I appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, man,
we've
thank
been
you
talking
for having
about
me. It's
this for a while now.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.